Mr. Vivek Srivastava. Vivek is a distinguished IPS officer, somebody who's been involved in few of the most remarkable and few of the most critical operations in the country.
Well, the Honorable Chief Minister of Gujarat, Mr. Narendra Modi, when he became Prime Minister, I was posted as the head of the Prime Minister's security, as the director of the Special Protection Group. I would forever be indebted to him for having selected me out of such a galaxy of outstanding officers who were actually available for that post.
I don't know of many people who have had the opportunity, privilege, and the honor of serving three prime ministers.
I joined the SPG in 2004, early March. Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister at that point of time. Then, of course, the government changed subsequently. So I got to be in the SPG while Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister of the country. And then, of course, after 5.5 years in the SPG, I had shifted to the Intelligence Bureau. And when Mr. Narendra Modi, he became the Prime Minister of the country, I again came back to SPG as its director. Started my career as a ACP in Surat city. I joined in 1992, early part of November. And on 6th December, there was this Babri Masjid Riot demolition. And there were severe riots in Surat. Close to 170 people got killed in Surat city. I was there, so I had to face the brunt of the riot.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the show, The Ex-Monks Drive. A show that brings to you world-class leaders, thought leaders, individuals who are doing exceptionally well in their respective careers. I'm your host, Gaurav Arora, and our today's guest is Mr. Vivek Srivastava. Vivek is a distinguished IPS officer. He's one of the most celebrated IPS officers in the country. A service spanning over 3 decades, somebody who's been involved in few of the most remarkable and few of the most critical operations in the country. A service that started in the year 1989 in Gujarat cadre to playing a pivotal role in Intelligence Bureau as well as Special Protection Group. Vivek has always been on the forefront of law enforcement and national security. Currently, he is the Director General for Fire Service, Civil Defense and Home Guards. Let's take a dive and understand what it means to be an IPS officer. Mr. Srivastava, such a pleasure having you here. It took me some time to have you on this show. I'm absolutely humbled and privileged that we have finally Mr. Vivek Srivastava. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me here.
I don't know of many people who have had the opportunity, privilege, and the honor of serving 3 prime ministers. Every time when I would think about that, I would say, wow, what a career it has been. What's the first feeling when you look at your career?
It is a sense of satisfaction. And looking back, actually, it is not that you actually plan for many things, but it happens. And my actually career has been something like that because many times I have landed at difficult situation, interesting places, not because I had planned for that, but it just happened.
It just happened.
So, as you were saying about the 3 prime ministers, because I joined the SPG in 2004 March, early March. Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister at that point of time. So, and the elections were coming. So I had to do number of election tours for Mr. Vajpayee. There were fewer officers there, so actually I was fast-tracked. Otherwise, normally the training period in SPG actually takes place for 6 months. So even in the first month, I was asked to go on tours. So I had not exactly a one-to-one, but a closer interaction with Mr. Vajpayee. Then, of course, the government changed subsequently. So I got to be in the SPG while Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister of the country. And then, of course, after 5.5 years in the SPG, I had shifted to the Intelligence Bureau. And when Mr. Narendra Modi, he became the Prime Minister of the country, I again came back to SPG as its director. Well, the government gives orders, and being a public servant, you have to obey them.
I would definitely dwell into your experiences of having worked with Mr. Vajpayee, Dr. Manmohan Singh, and of course, our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi ji. But before we get there, I would love to understand who Vivek is. Say to yourself that I would like to be an IPS officer. What was that moment?
Let me speak about myself first. My father was in the Indian Administrative Service, so in that way, I had a privileged background. I went to a good school, St. Michael's in Patna. As I said, I really didn't plan for getting into the Indian Police Service. In fact, if I tell you, looking back, I was not a particularly good student till class fourth. Uh, you may ask why, but actually, gradually it improved, and by class 10th, I was a decently good student. Now, there was one very interesting thing which happened actually, how this actually transformation took place.
Shift. How did that shift happen?
When till class 4th, I would always think कि if I remember something, then I'm going to forget it. So, might as well remember it before the exam. Before the exam, it would not be possible to remember everything. So I would go to the exam unprepared and, of course, do reasonably badly, depending upon how bad the preparation was. That is not the case for English, but English, gradually I learned that this has to be actually absorbed and learned over a period of time. So if you just learn grammar, it doesn't really help.
Yeah.
So it comes to you as you keep on working on it, if you keep on reading. So once I realized that if you remember something, re-remembering the same thing requires almost a tenth of the time. So when this realization happened suddenly, then I thought, oh, so I will not be able to remember it if I do it just before the exam.
In a privileged family, because your father was into Indian administrative services. Now, how has been born and brought up in that kind of environment shaped your approach towards life that you still cherish today as well?
Actually, I'll go back slightly. Now, while I was born in a reasonably privileged environment, that was not the case with my father. He, his father died when he was very, very young. And he grew up in a village which did not have electricity, neither a road and neither a school. So his widowed mother was there. And he studied in a village school. So he had a very difficult childhood. But he managed it. And in fact, after class 10th, the situation was such that if he got a scholarship from the government, his education will continue. But if that scholarship was not there, it would actually end because there was not enough money around. So, in fact, even though he was a very bright student, he actually opted for Agra University because they were offering him a bursary scholarship, which was probably 5 or 10 rupees more than what Allahabad University was offering, but which was the top university in UP at that point of time. What he told me, he is still alive, that when he was in graduation, his highest ambition in life was to become a clerk in the railways.
Wow.
When he topped in the university, his principal says, why do you want to do that? Why don't you actually try for the civil services? So that was the first time he realized he can also try for the civil services. And the rest is history because he actually qualified. First time he did not qualify. He got just around 20 marks out of 400 in interview. And the next time he got maybe slightly more in interview, 20, 30 or 40, between 20 to 40 out of 400 interview, but he got through in the IAS. Now, what the point I am trying to say is, I had asked him, do you have rancor because you were evaluated so poorly in the interview? He said, no. You see, I came from a very, very rural background. My English was also not good. At that time, there was a lot of people coming from presidency and Stephens. They were the people who got actually high marks. Yeah. So I accepted fate as it was. So there was some amount of acceptance of fate. Fate may not actually hand you an even deal every time.
Every time, yeah.
So while I was there, I was very conscious. While currently I'm having this, but this has not been the case throughout in our family. That gave me actually a solid mooring.
It's so humbling. I mean, it provides you such a clear-cut grounding in the moment.
Actually, you should work, etc., for your soul and not exactly for money, because mind is very important. That was the realization. The principal importance is the mind and the satisfaction which you get out of your work. So every individual has to be treated differently depending upon their strengths and weaknesses. Now, as far as my children are concerned, 2 or 3 things which I did. One was to give them reasonable independence, but within a set boundary. So it is not a democracy where actually one can be voted out.
Yeah.
So while we will give you freedom, while there will be a boundary in which you can actually exercise your freedom,
Yeah.
but beyond that, it is what we as parents say which will go. And to say, yes, because these things are changing, they also witness that others are getting more freedom. So then we would engage in a conversation with them. And of course, when they grew up, I would also say, bhai, what I am telling you, or whatever words of so-called wisdom I am telling you, is based on my experience and what I think is correct and true. Which may not exactly be.
Yeah.
So I only implore you to do one thing. To think about those, and subsequently if you feel that these do not hold within the current circumstances, you are free to take as much of it or completely disregard it. But
you're okay with that.
I'm fine, I'm okay with that. Second is about studies. This mad rush towards getting to the best school and going to the coaching, in my opinion, doesn't really work.
And I can so much relate to that. How come we have got the maximum percentage of people coming from Bihar? They have been able to crack UPSC. What about that place?
I would not like to say that they are any better or worse as far as students they are concerned. But 2 or 3 things are there. In Bihar, one, it was an agrarian economy with very little industry. So the exposure to anything, any private sector or public sector is very, very limited. So you really don't know what actually vocation you can get into, finance, etc. Even now, very few industries are there. So this is one avenue which is there. Second is maybe everywhere, but also in Bihar, this affords civil services support for upward mobility. In sociology, you say that everybody wants to be upwardly mobile. So if you crack this, then you get social acceptance, which is much beyond which you might be having today. For example, because there is an entrenched caste system. If you want to get into from that atmosphere of poverty, caste, oppression, etc. So if you crack it, you are out.
Yeah.
So this is was a potent means for social mobility. That was another way.
You are from 1989 Gujarat cadre.
Correct. I came on central deputation, and since then I have been here. I never intended to permanently come out of Gujarat. I wanted to do a deputation initially, a different organization.
What's happening outside?
What's happening outside? Matlab, different organizations, state, because you. Now, one thing which I saw in Gujarat was a realization, because I worked in 4 districts, important districts. Matlab, in reverse order, my last district was Kutch. I was SP Kutch. Before that, I was SP Baroda Rural.
And during your Kutch time, I'm sure Mr. Modi was the chief minister.
He was he became the CM while I was SP Kutch. Before that, I was on UN deputation to Bosnia Herzegovina for a year before Baroda. Before that, I was for a very short while SP of Junagadh district. Before Junagadh district, I was superintendent of police operations in the anti-terrorist squad, where we did a number of operations. And prior to that, I was,
that was, right?
Around about 2008.
And your name was on the front page of several newspapers, if my memory supports me. We'll talk about that. Yeah.
Before that, my first posting as in the district was as SP Panchmal's at Godhra. That is the headquarters.
Yeah.
Later became not so
Yeah.
famous for all the wrong reasons. And I was ACP. I started my career as a ACP in Surat city. So, as luck would have it, on my first posting in Surat city, I joined in 1992, early part of early part of November. And on 6th December, there was this Babri Masjid Janambhoomi demolition. And there were severe riots in Surat. Close to 170 people got killed in Surat city. So I was ACP during that tough phase. 1.5 years I was there. So I had to face the brunt of the riots because they were very severe in my area of jurisdiction, which was there. And subsequently, of course, yeah. But one thing is there. Okay, the force Gujarat Police is outstanding police force. Even now, I remember many of my subordinates, and they have kept in touch with me. And across all the postings which I had, there is not one instance where they have let me down. So I can, with some confidence, say it is the leadership which counts.
Yeah.
And there's no point blaming your subordinates because they will stand by you.
Yeah. Can you recall an instance where you took a leap of faith and you stood in front of people that you thought might go other way around for you? And you realized that because you took that leap of faith with your team standing next to you, you could handle that situation.
It has happened a number of times. For example, when I was SP Baroda Rural, just in the adjoining district is the Narmada Dam. And those were the times when there were large protests against construction and subsequently for raising the height of the Narmada Dam and for settlement of the tribals, etc. Being SP of Baroda Rural, a large part of my jurisdiction, we had to face these. And Yaseen Bhatkal had actually come, and she was an iconic figure, but a very well-known figure. And as a superintendent of police, my job was to ensure that life doesn't come to a standstill by the protesters. While the protesters, they were bent upon enforcing their bandh call. Now, it is a very tough call. Now, you must realize, but as a leader of a police force, one must realize who are you actually looking at? So, Medha Patkar, they had their cause. Many people may agree with that cause. Many people may not agree with that cause. But in any case, they are not criminals. So, actually, I found out where they were actually in a village and strategizing for the next day. So I took a motorcycle along with a constable and we drove in the middle of night and went there in civilian dress. And when I entered there, it was a small village. They were in a hut. I said, I'm the superintendent of Baroda Rural. So there was a stunned silence. They thought there was a police raid to arrest them. So I said, I'm the superintendent. I have come alone. I am not even carrying a weapon. So we engaged in a conversation. Many of them had come from Delhi. Many had a lawyer background, somewhere from JNU, etc. To cut a long story short, I said, look here. While my duty is to ensure peace, you also do not want violence. You want only you are projecting a cause. It would pain me a great deal to use force against you. So next day, while the protests happened, they happened without too much of disturbance or violence. We were able to manage it. Almost no force was used. We regulated them. So what I intend to say is that many times, while you may be at the opposite end as a police force, enforcing the rule of law, You have to actually make a distinction when you are dealing with a criminal,
Yeah.
a terrorist, and when you are dealing with your citizens.
Yeah. So, where did you get that courage and conviction to go straight in that village, in their house, and have a conversation?
Most of the issues, if you know beforehand what is developing, it is a good idea to think on those and how you can solve it in the best or manage it in the best possible. Many things are unsolvable. You have to manage those conditions. So applying your mind becomes very, very important. So that will give you a broad idea how you can actually go about it. While I'm not a student of history, but getting into the history of those movements is also important. So I actually spoke to a number of people when the last time these protests has happened, it had led to a lot of use of force, lathi charge, although firing was not done, cross complaints, allegations of misbehavior with women, allegations against police of overuse of force beyond reasonable limits, and for which cases were filed. And actually, it was a lose-lose for both, because police was also dragged to the court number of times. Force, justified or unjustified, were used against students, etc. Because of course that is never a good thing and never very pleasant. So then you have to come to what approach I can have. And many times, I would not say every time, communicating. And if the public also comes to know your intent,
Yeah. That's important.
that is important. And then, of course, as you grow in service, your reputation is also there to back you up.
Yeah. Yeah.
If this man means business, he will stand by his word.
You know, movies have glorified the image of an IPS officer. If you look at James Bond and all these cops, multi-starrer movies which Bollywood is producing these days, they have romanticized what it means to be an IPS officer, larger than life. What is it that we as individuals who are not a part of this IPS, IS community, we are not aware of? What are those vulnerable moments? What are those difficulties and challenges that only you know it deep down in your heart?
The public sees as you said, rightly mentioned, the outer facade.
Yeah.
Yes, you are there. You have a public presence because of your uniform. But what people don't see is increasingly, because when I joined, then the mobiles were not there. Now you willy-nilly have a camera in every person's hand. So you are in focus 24/7.
All the times.
There is a demand from your time from different quarters, your family, your parents,
Yeah.
your friends, the public, your seniors. There is a demand from everywhere. So you have to actually manage that. The casualty of time will be at the account of your family, friends, and your parents. So because they will have little access to your time, which they also deserve actually. Second is you are very lonely. Everybody is lonely at the top. So you may think the person is having all the fun, but it is a very lonely existence. And number of times you have to take hard decisions. Unlike many other services, in the police services, you are leading a force.
Yeah.
You are not self-actualizing on paper. It is very distinct difference between an Indian administrative service officer and a police service officer.
Yeah.
And if you're leading a force, you have to be lead by example. You cannot fool them.
You cannot chicken out and say, attack.
Well, you can. But if you think you are going to fool your subordinates, it really doesn't happen.
And I remember one of our conversations where it was quite a vulnerable conversation. What kind of fears do you carry for your family members and vice versa? What kind of conversation that you get into with your wife when it comes to the security of your own personal life, when it comes to security of your family members, your daughters? Because in this tenure, it's not that people would have always glorified your presence. You would have your own share of arguments as well. It would have created some kind of animosity as well. So what kind of conversations, what kind of fears?
One is कि at least me personally, I have kept my family completely away from my official work. So at home, I don't talk shop. कि what is happening. So the tensions don't get transmitted to them. So in fact, at times that is a grouse of my wife also. कि many husbands they speak, you don't speak about this, but I find it is actually better to have a keep my office and private life actually separate. Second is, as I said, police is a force. If the force trusts you, believe me, there is little anybody can do against you.
I love the glitter when you say this. Hardly anybody who can do anything against
So
you.
I was told about this. Actually, I tell you, when I was Baroda SP, again, there was this solvent scam. So many companies were actually adulterating petrol across the country using solvent. Now, again, to cut a long story short.
No, would love to hear the whole story. Please go ahead. We have all the time.
So actually, then I'll start with the beginning. I get a call from, while I was SP Operations Anti-Terrorist Squad, there was an informant of mine. He calls me when I was SP Baroda. That there is a tanker which has been seized by Ahmedabad Rural Police. तो उसको आप छुड़वा दीजिए. So I told him why. They told me, bhai, in Gujarati, he told me, कि bhai, आप लोग, you will only be actually arresting small fry. You can't do anything about the big fry. So actually that touched me to the quick. So I said, no, that is not the case. If we have enough evidence, we will even act against the high and mighty. So he said, okay, sir, then you get this person released. Then I'll come and tell you. So I said, okay. Since he was my old informant, so I called up SP Ahmedabad Rural. Generally, I had a good regard in the police community in Gujarat. So I told him, why don't you release him? So he, on my word, he actually released him. So he came here. So he told me that there are companies here who manufacture solvent. At that time, manufactured solvent used to cost close to 9 rupees per liter. Petrol was close to 29 rupees per liter. So this solvent, there were fictitious companies who used solvent as their base material. For example, paint, but that companies would not exist. So this demand for solvent, 10,000 liter, etc., would come from that company. They will send the check or a draft. The tanker will go out. Benzene would be mixed into it so as to match the density. This will then go to a petrol pump. The petrol would be adulterated. Other oil corporations were also mixed up with that, so that the total outtake was, the counter was taken back 10,000 liters, so that the total offtake would not show more than what the company had sold that petrol pump. And of course, every 9 rupee thing you are selling off for 20 rupees, so there was a lot of money to be made.
Yeah.
And they were, of course, paying off my junior staff also, and across everywhere.
It happens everywhere.
I don't know whether it happens everywhere. They were paying off here.
Yeah.
So this was being done. So he said, this is a huge scam, but you take care of that. So again, so I did a study about that, how this thing is happening. Discuss this issue with the district magistrate, because it is adulteration, so it falls within the. So jointly we took this up. And with the SDM, we raided all the companies, booked all these people. They were very influential people, and of course, white-collared criminals, as they can say. And we were able to arrest all of them. We also appointed a APP, so they could not even get bail in the district court. In the High Court, actually, I had also gone. And I actually also argued in the High Court, and the bail was refused even in the High Court. So this was so as I said, this was one case where I was told by the Commissioner of Police Baroda, some people are, because you have caused such a lot of financial loss to that, many people are actually gunning for you. But God has been kind, but I really did not. While you are in active service, you get some protection because you have a gunman. And police is a trained police force. And normally I would always keep PSOs and select them myself. So they would run with me in the morning. So there would be a great personal connect, and they would be chosen also. So you don't require too much of a force. You require a good force, but numbers may not always be. It doesn't really matter.
You spoke about you had your own informers. I was like really intrigued when I got to know that all these IPS officers, they have their informers planted and placed in different locations. On what basis do you select an informer? What do you look for? Because they might not be trained officers.
It is a trade craft.
Yeah.
So while in intelligence agencies, this trade craft is taught, which is classified material. But in district, you learn it on the go.
Yeah.
But how do you do it? As I said, I am not at liberty to making it public. How you identify an informant and how you engage them.
But how do you pick up like this person could be an informer for me? How do you identify?
You don't pick up a person. You do the reverse thing. What is the information which I want? Who would be having this information?
Got it.
So then out of a spectrum of individuals who may be having that information, then you choose few individuals. Then you work on them.
Got it.
In a very, very broad sense.
Yeah. Super. Okay. So let's take one step forward now. Since we have been talking about, of course, you would have created not so pleasant ripples in the environment for another set of people that people would not have expected that from you, right? I guess that was 2013 you were in news. You were instrumental in the arrest of Yaseen Bhatkal. Was it 2013?
Yes.
Yeah. Tell me about that, because that was a very significant event. How did that happen?
Actually, I joined, I was in the intelligence bureau at that point of time. And in 2009, I joined as the head of the intelligence setup for Bihar and Jharkhand. So it is known as the SIB, Patna. Now, before I had joined, there was no terror incident in Bihar. But once I took over and did a study of that, I said, this is one place which can actually harbor terrorists. The reason for them was, one, you have open border with Nepal. The maximum depth of North Bihar, north of Ganges, is 120 kilometers. So it is basically 3 hours to 4 hours and you are in Nepal. There is a substantial Muslim population which has grown over the years, especially the districts like Katihar, Araria, Kishanganj, Purnia, a substantial Muslim population. Many have migrated post-independence from Bangladesh and have settled down and now become Indian citizens. Many terrorists are Muslims, not all of them are Muslims, but many of them are Muslims. So you can actually blend. There is a lot of poverty there in North Bihar. The highest density of population is in North Bihar. It's not in Kerala. So if you want to actually get out of the radar of security forces, what better place than North Bihar? Another thing which was at that point of time was that the police strength of Bihar police was very low. In a police station, the actually constabulary strength was not exceeding 7 to 8 in large police stations. They were assisted by home guards and other type of forces, but the real core policing is also the infrastructure was very poor. Road network was poor. So rural policing was poor. The political climate was, in a sense, also favorable. It was an open border, so you can escape at any point of time. So if I was a terrorist and I was hiding from the security forces, where would I hide? It was a no-brainer. North Bihar would be one of the ideal places. Now, while that was the situation, and I had spoken about it to my officers, two incidents happened. One was for the first time, there was a bomb blast in Bodh Gaya. Although nobody got killed, but that was a very, very serious incident. The entire security structure got shaken because this was the first time it had happened in Bihar. Of course, we didn't know who did it, but one possibility was that it may have been the Indian Mujahideen who might have done it. Subsequently, it turned out to be wrong. And from various study of interrogation material, etc., we came to the conclusion that yes, they had come here, North Bihar. They were actually going to using the open border with Nepal to go to Nepal. And there were some inputs to suggest that Yaseen Bhatkal and his cohorts may be actually hiding in Nepal. So we launched an operation. Informants were engaged. They were tasked. And it took us 1.5 years of painstaking work to actually identify and house them in Nepal.
Wow.
And subsequently, they were interdicted with the help of Nepal police.
And during that time, right, I'm sure the kind of pressure that you would have experienced from all over must be at a very different level altogether.
So as a leader, if you think you are the only person who is capable of doing a thing, and you start doing everything yourself, there will be no time. And I can with reasonable confidence say you will never achieve your full protection. So when you are a leader, you have to see who are the persons who can do what. Give them task after evaluating them. Yes, they should be able to do this task. Give them a reasonable free hand. And then give them whatever resources they require for that work. Now, if one has imbibed some amount of Indian philosophy, तो उसमें है ना कि आप कर्म करो फल की चिंता नहीं करो. So that is actually a very calming influence.
It is.
Yes, I will do my job, but there is no certainty the results will follow.
Or I will get the results as I'm expecting them to be.
Yes. So if you have that in your back of your mind, some amount of equanimity, then somehow that kind of pressure has never afflicted me.
Yeah.
So even during riots, in very troubled times, my mind has been reasonably or maybe even exceptionally calm. So that has allowed me to actually think ahead. Trusting one's subordinate, I have done. And as I said, even in Gujarat, I don't remember a single case when I have bestowed trust on a subordinate and he has breached that trust.
Yeah.
He may not have been able to perform to my expectations, but that is expected. But that he didn't even try or did against what I wanted, that has never happened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even those whom I knew they are corrupt, when I told them, bhai, dekhiye, what you did before, I don't care. What you will do after, I don't care. But here I am, I trust you.
Wow.
And I will stand by you. And I will give my post for you. Few people will be able to do that.
Yeah.
And they have never actually failed me. Not really. But I'll be very truthful.
Has there been a time where you gunned down somebody?
It was not a bullet, but I escaped very early in my life. That was, as I told you, when I was ACP in Surat City. And at that point of time, Mr. P.K. Datta was the Commissioner of Police. He was a very renowned police officer. And one thing which I remember, which he told me, when I freshly joined, the trout is controlled by the baton and not by the bullet.
Yeah.
So since he was a very renowned officer, I took it to my heart. So I didn't even actually get a revolver issued. And when after the demolition of Babri Masjid, then Muslim crowd started gathering along the road. They started abusing the police, and small incidents started happening. One motorcycle was burned. Some people were roughed up. So I was just close to just about a month old in service. I was in my official vehicle. It was a gypsy. I had a driver, a gunman, and a wireless operator. Full stop. I really didn't know what to do. Theoretical training in the National Police Academy and actually dealing with a violent crowd are two different stories. So, we would put on the siren and go inside so that the crowd will run away, and then you come back, and this cat and mouse game started happening. So I thought, it looks good. You just put on the siren and you go.
Yeah,
it takes care of the situation. So in one of the lanes, we took the gypsy, and then I don't know what happened. The vehicle stalled and it stopped. The damn thing would not start. So the crowd was running away. So I also got out from the gypsy and took a lathi and I started running. As I said, I didn't used to carry a revolver at that point of time. So my gunman stayed to protect the gypsy because they may actually burn the gypsy. And the wireless operator also with a lathi, he followed me. So I was just out of the National Police Academy, reasonably fit. I'm still fit now.
Yeah.
So I ran behind the crowd and the crowd kept on running. I kept on following them. So immediately, maybe I would have crossed 700, 800 meters and lost sight of the gypsy. And then I suddenly found myself surrounded by the crowd in a lane. And they started pelting both of us with stones. Now, fortunately, both of us were wearing helmets. So it would hit on the body, but the head was safe. But unfortunately, my wireless operator, he had not strapped his helmet. So one of the bricks hit his helmet and it came off. Second brick hit him on the head and he collapsed on the ground. So I had given up. What can you do? You are surrounded by a crowd. You have a lathi which is of no use. So I actually caught him by the collar and then came close to the wall of the shutters of the shops which were there. Because the shutters, they have this awning over that.
Yeah.
So only the flat trajectory stones can then hit you. The heavier stones which have a larger trajectory, they can't hit you.
Wow.
No. So,
you calculated that quickly in that moment, right?
It is a simple thing. But the point is, they can close in and then use the heavier missiles.
Yeah.
So I was thinking now it is going to be a short end to maybe a illustrious career or whatever. So the driver and the gunman who were there, they realized that this is a place where he should not have gone. He's a fresh IPS officer. He doesn't know the locality. This is not a locality where he should be actually be going inside. So he sent a wireless. The new ASP he has run inside to send reinforcement immediately. Now, as luck would have it, the local SHO, he heard this on wireless. So he thought, this man is gone there, he will be lynched, he will die, and then I'll be suspended. Probably he thought that. So he immediately rushed with his force. So actually I was rescued from there.
Yeah. That was the initial first month
of my service.
Wow.
So I was black and blue. So I came out. It took me 1 hour to compose myself. Took a few disciplines to get rid of the pain. First thing which I did was to send for a 9mm Beretta. I'm going, this revolver is not going to do. I want my full 13 rounds in the chamber. And from that day, I have always carried a pistol along with me.
Yeah. I hope you're not carrying it right now. That's fine. So, Mr. Srivastava, from where you were stoned in the first month of your service to being the DIG and then the Director Security for 3 Prime Ministers, how has been that journey if you were to define it in a sentence or two?
In a sentence, actually, it was a privilege.
Yeah.
To have worked for 3 great men this country has ever produced.
Yeah. Yeah.
All three, all they rose to the highest spot, the highest position the country can give.
Yeah. And all three are very different individuals.
Completely different individuals, and all three from pretty humble background.
So, how was it for you? One, when you got to know that you'll be serving and you'll be, you have been given this prestigious position in the special protection group with Mr. Vajpayee ji. How was it for you? And how was it for you to be around this giant?
My working with for Mr. Vajpayee was not for too long, but two or three instances and the anecdotes which I have heard, matlab, I can actually recount. One was I got to interact with Mr. Vajpayee slightly more closely when I was his CSLO when he had gone for his retreat to Manali. He used to actually go to an annual retreat for 15 days to Manali.
Okay.
So I was sent as the CSLO. That was also a privilege in the sense that I was one of the more junior officers to be sent as a CSLO for the Prime Minister. That was actually as a CSLO, you are the Chief Security Liaison Officer. Very affable and a personality who would actually bring down the temperature and the tension around himself. So you feel very, very comfortable with him. I was a just promoted DIG. He was the head of the country, the CEO of the country. But even then, number of times, I was also invited for tea when they were having tea. The family was having tea in the evening. Now, one reason for that was because his son-in-law had studied in the same school in which we had. He was 2 batches senior to me. So that gave me, Mr. Vajpayee, what I found him was he was not very communicative. But his expressions were very communicative, and whenever he would come up with a one-liner, two-liner, it had profound meaning.
Huge impact as well. I mean, the way he used to speak, those pauses, that long silences, and then another word.
So while I don't profess to say that I had a very close interaction with him or anything, but he was a figure which I, as a young officer, actually revered. And to be able to come even in his presence and to feel reasonably comfortable in his presence was a big thing.
Yeah, I mean, there was a different kind of statesmanship in him.
One or two instances I can recount, but which maybe actually be public also. One was, at that time I was not in the SPG, but this was told by one of the people who were there in the SPG during that time. And I presume this would be the correct what they would have told me. You remember that there was this attack on Parliament, and then the Indian forces had then gone almost to the border, and there was a war-like situation.
Yes.
And at that time, Mr. Vajpayee had given ye ki is baar aar paar ki ladai hogi. That was the phrase which was used. But subsequently, the forces were withdrawn. Now, I was told that when the reporters, they came to him and said, Sahab, you had said that aar paar ki ladai hogi, lekin there is de-escalation. Why so? The reply he gave was simply fantastic. Without directly replying to the question, he only said कि बादल छट गए हैं, धूप निकल गया. Now, you see, this metaphor conveys everything.
Everything, yeah.
And also, number two thing which I had noticed was that he was such a figure that no minister, every minister had a huge regard for him.
Yeah.
And he was running an NDA government. And whether they were from the BJP or from the alliance part, if he adjudicated on an issue, nobody questioned his wisdom.
Yeah.
So it was a great privilege working for him. That is the grace of God. I joined the SPG during that time.
Yeah. And how was the transition for you? I mean, from NDA to the Congress government. One is a total shift of the way people would show up as individuals. But then at the same time, if you look at Dr. Manmohan Singh ji, he was an equally, I mean, he was as big as Mr. Vajpayee ji was, as big a giant that he was, with the kind of wisdom, the kind of understanding of the finance and the economics that he brought into the world. It's a very different level altogether. How was the transition for you?
Transition, surprisingly, was not very difficult. The reason is, while the director was changed, Mr. Vanchu became the director when the UPA came to power. Mr. Das was the director when Mr. Vajpayee was the Prime Minister. But SPG being a very, very professional organization, there are no repercussions even if when there was a change in government. So, down below, after the director, there was no changes. And everybody was assigned responsibilities depending upon what the director felt were they good at. So, I was, for a large part of my career under Mr. Manmohan Singh, I was DIG operations, which actually looks after the PM house, the PM office, the portion of the parliament where the PM actually normally goes, and also supervises over the close protection teams of the Prime Minister. So, in a sense, this is the most important charge for a DIG to have in the special protection group. And I was one of the junior most DIGs also at that point of time, but I was given it. For a long time, I was also holding charge of DIG functions, which looks after the programs of the Prime Minister while he's in Delhi. And of course, two other charges also came. So with Manmohan Singh, I had a longish interaction. As you said, very correctly said, both the Prime Minister were giants in their own right, but they couldn't have been more different.
Yeah.
I can't profess to say that I knew him very well because, of course, I was only looking after security, but from the ringside, what I had was Dr. Manmohan Singh was more hands-on.
Yeah.
And he would sit in office and do files, etc. because we would know when he is in office, and he would work for long hours in office and do files, etc. While Mr. Vajpayee was more of a statesman, he would have a vision, convey that vision to his senior officers, and then they would implement it. So that was one very large difference. Both were thorough gentlemen. Mr. Manmohan Singh, very much so. Very polite, to a fault. At times, for minor misdemeanor of his political colleagues, he has even apologized to me.
Really?
He had apologized because his colleagues had not behaved in a fashion which they should have behaved.
Yeah.
Because you see, the job of the security is it is inimical to what the principal wants.
Yeah.
The principal would want to engage with the crowd, be as accessible as possible. Our job is to restrict access, reduce his contact. So that actually enhances security.
Yeah.
So there is always a tussle between the security and the need of a public figure to interact with the public. So there has to be actually a balance, has to be reached. If the protectee is made too isolated, then in a sense, as a security agency, we are doing him a disservice.
Yeah.
Because we are reducing accessibility to the public in any case which may have actually electoral repercussions. If there is complete laissez-faire, then we may have security implications.
Yeah. So there's a fine line that we need to draw.
So you have to access what are the threats, which are the areas from which the threat can emanate. Look ahead and try to plug those and use some amount of element of surprise, etc., so as to actually ensure his security while you do not completely restrict his access.
Yeah.
So it is actually rather a difficult job. So in that way, you have to actually interact with the protectee to make him aware of the threats, security threats which he faces, so that he is able to appreciate and maybe understand the reasons why you are doing what you are doing.
Yeah. And that's again a conversation is required.
Yes.
So let's shift gears and then let's talk about you have been privileged to take care of the security of our current Prime Minister, Honorable Mr. Modi Saab.
When the Honorable Chief Minister of Gujarat, Mr. Narendra Modi, when he became Prime Minister, at that point of time, I was heading the IB unit at Patna. I was posted as the just before my posting, I actually had the opportunity to go to Guwahati, where I was given the President's Police Medal for distinguished service by the Honorable Prime Minister. And immediately after that, as the head of the Prime Minister's security, as the director of the Special Protection Group, that was, I must say, an honor and a privilege. And I would forever be indebted to him for having selected me out of such a galaxy of outstanding officers who were actually available for that post. So, speaking about him, I think he has had a remarkable journey from the place where he has come from, which is actually now in public domain, to the place where he has reached, which all the constraints which he has faced along the way.
And he continues to face.
That is truly remarkable. One or two things which I can actually point it out for. One, he is truly a great learner. I have never seen a person who is so perceptive and is so willing to learn and learns so fast. Second is his patience, and he's an extremely good listener. But even at that point of time, he is willing to listen to anybody without interrupting a person and with rapt attention. And this kind of focus, I have very rarely come across in any individual. Any individual. I have also seen him, I'll go further and seen him in meetings while I was in IB, when he would be chairing the DGP's conference for 2 continuous days. We may actually feel slightly drowsy or maybe even take a jhabki. But he would be sitting there listening intently to every speaker. Not all were great speakers. And absorbing everything. Is his indefatigable energy.
I mean, that's a big question. How does he get that kind of energy? I mean, what does he do?
So, of course, he practices yoga, but I also practice yoga. But I can tell you, I'm reasonably fit. I practice yoga. I'm one of the maybe fitter chaps here. But and he's more than a decade elder to me. But I had a very, very hard time keeping pace with him.
Wow.
It was exhausting. And with reasonable confidence, I can say, no director SPG can keep pace with him.
So let's talk about you said that he's one of the finest learners that you have come across. And you have served 3 the most powerful men in the country, at least. Right? So if you can give an example of where you found him an amazing learner.
You only look back. What access the Honorable Prime Minister, the current Honorable Prime Minister had regarding sources of information, etc., in his earlier days and during the course of his life. But he can now speak, not now, pretty early in his tenure, on almost everything with reasonable authority.
Yeah.
The kind of formal education which we see, going to a very reputed college, etc., he had never been to. That is open.
Yeah.
Whatever he has studied on his own.
Yeah. You were giving an example where he was to salute. And would love to hear from you if you're comfortable sharing that.
One instance I can share, which shows all three of his. After joining, the first important program which the Prime Minister, as a Prime Minister, he had to attend was the 26th January function.
Yeah.
I took charge in December 2014, and of course, after barely a month, he was not the number one person, but because the 26th January is the President's function. But there are a number of events which the Prime Minister does on his own before the parade actually happens. So, as is normally the case, the Director SPG goes and briefs the Prime Minister on any important event which he has to attend, what will be the sequence of event and what he is expected to do. So, we had prepared a slide, even a video, and with the presentation, I told him, so I said, sir, your 26th January function can be split into two parts. You start from your house, and then first you will go to the Amar Jawan Jyoti, where you will pay homage to the fallen soldiers. And from there, you will go to the saluting dais, where the President will take salute. Now, this first part of the function, where you will go to pay homage to the Amar Jawan Jyoti, is your function. So, you will be on national television, and you will be the principal, because the President will not be there. So, when you go there will be a number of times you will actually have to salute. It is not only one salute which you have to do. So, while I'll tell you what will be the cue when you will have to salute, so I actually gave him a detailed briefing when he will have to salute, when he will have to bring his hand down, when he will have to salute again, bring his hand down again, salute again, bring his hand down again. He listened very intently. Then I said, sir, you will be saluting, and this time the lead agency, this time is the agency. It is taken by turn, once by the Army, once by the Air Force, and one by the Navy. All these three agencies have a different way of saluting. So, since this time it is the Army, my recommendation would be you salute in the Army fashion. Then I gave him a demonstration, sir, how it should be done. This is how we salute. And what are the common fault which may happen while saluting? So, one will be that the thumb may stick out, or the wrist will not be at 180 degrees, so it will be bent, etc. And where the finger should be above the right eye, 1 inch above the right eye, your middle finger. So, he made a mental note of everything. And I, in fact, went beyond my brief even to suggest that maybe, sir, you may like to practice. So, next day, I was reasonably confident that, like many other prime ministers who had come again, there will be some minor mistakes here, there. But again, vouch for. He made no single mistake.
Wow.
Neither when to salute, when to bring the hand down, and in the type of salute. So,
he would have practiced so many times.
I have no means of knowing because whether he practiced or not. But the end result is that whatever I had briefed him, every word he had absorbed.
Got registered so well.
And had ultimately then put it into practice also. So if this can happen with me, this would have been happening with other briefings which he has been getting earlier also.
Yeah.
So his huge quality of listening, absorbing, taking out the important points and implementing it. That is the hallmark of a great man.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Very often it happens that when you are, especially in the position where you were at, Mr. Srivastava, it becomes very difficult for an individual to say no. And even to the next level, when the person that you are saying no to accepts your no with a lot of grace and dignity. Did you find yourself at a place where you were supposed to say no, you ended up saying no, and the other person accepted your no with equal grace and dignity?
One thing which I had learned, actually, when I was SP Kutch was, just digress a little. There, Mr. Bill Clinton had come after the earthquake. He was not the president at that time, but he had Secret Service security, the former president of the United States.
Bill Clinton, you're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
So he visited a number of places, and since he was important personality there, and I was SP there, I also accompanied him in the carcade. So one of the places I had an interaction with the Secret Service. So I asked them the same question which you are actually asking, just to know ki, matlab, what do they do. So they said ki, matlab, if the president wants to go somewhere and there is a lot of threat, what would you do? So there one line answer I still remember. Ki if a president wants something, we have to make it happen. It is not in your capacity to refuse the president. You do whatever it takes to make it happen. Only when it is beyond your capacity to make it happen, only then you may think about saying no.
Wow.
So, with the resources a country like India has, while and the PM, especially Mr. Modi, he would push the envelope because he travels by metro also. He would go to many places, etc. So, as a security in charge, we had to make it happen. And once the protectee actually realizes that this person is not saying no at the drop of a hat and is trying his best to make it happen, as I am putting it, putting all the resources, and it is only in very rare cases where it is beyond his control or he thinks it is beyond his control, he is coming up with this. Then the acceptance comes much more easy. Now, in India, it is easy as the head of the Special Protection Group to make things happen because you have all the resources of the country, the army, the air force, whatever you can bring to bear. The problem more happens is in foreign countries where not all resources are at your disposal. So there have been outside where one has had to be more careful, especially in a foreign country. But again, I would say that I had the privilege and I would always be indebted to him for affording me this opportunity to be his chief.
But have you ever said no to him for something?
I remember in maybe there were some instances in the program which because of the threat in Bangladesh, where one had to actually do minor changes in the program where so that is the only recollection which I have. Like for example, he was the first prime minister to have visited Pakistan and Afghanistan in decades. And I was the person who was his head of SPG during both the times. So Afghanistan was a challenge because but I don't have to elaborate. So there I had gone to do the ASL, and there we made a lot of changes from the normal protocol. But I must say that there the Ministry of External Affairs and everybody supported me to the hilt because the threat there was very real and present. And we could do it. I'm not in a position to divulge ki, matlab, what things we did there, but it was a flawless tour.
Yeah.
The again challenge came when we were returning, when he and it was a sudden program, because the Prime Minister had a conversation with Mr. Nawaz Sharif. He actually had called him on his birthday to wish him. And Mr. Nawaz Sharif invited him to his house, saying, you will be overflying us in Pakistan, so why don't you drop in? And in the spur of the moment, the Prime Minister actually accepted it. And when a minute later, when we came to know, I was actually stunned.
हम पाकिस्तान जाएंगे.
We will be going to Pakistan. I thought, what has struck me and what wrong have I done to deserve this?
Okay. Tell me more about that. Then what happened? How did you...
So first, the PS, the Principal Secretary was there to... the conversation was happening in my... not within my earshot, but within not too long. And after that, the Principal Secretary calls me and says, Vivek, sir, the Prime Minister desires that we stop at in Pakistan and we'll go to Mr. Nawaz Sharif's house. I don't know what hit me. I was, as I said, rendered speechless. So, of course, natural instinct is to protest. So I also protested. मेरी नौकरी का कुछ
छोटे बच्चे हैं.
नहीं मेरी नौकरी का ख्याल करो यार. So but one thing which struck me, if I am so stunned and surprised by this, the opposition would also be stunned. So one of the biggest security, what actually aids your security, is surprise. Second was that Mr. Nawaz Sharif has personally invited him. He's the premier, and he's inviting him to his hometown, which is his Garh, where he has a lot of influence. So, knowing Pakistanis, they are actually also wonderful hosts. So, a host will never betray his guest in his hometown. That was a severe loss of faith. So he will also try his best to ensure safety and security. So I said, the Prime Minister wants to go. He has given his word. The surprise element is in our favor. Knowing whatever little I know about Pakistan, we are not going to the Taliban area where the Pakistan agencies don't have control. Here, Nawaz Sharif has control. So let us do it.
Yeah.
So I only said I'll require this kind of armament.
Yeah.
For which a substantial portion of the MEA entourage will have to be cut, which the MEA readily agreed to. So we took a higher security component in the craft and we went there. And rest is history.
Yeah. You know, my ancestors, they hail from Pakistan. My grandfather was in Pakistan. My dad was born in a small town in Bela in Pakistan. So I've heard so many good stories around Pakistan. How was it for you to meet Pakistanis in Pakistan? How are they similar to us? How are they different to us? Why do we carry that kind of animosity and bitterness against them? Do we really need to carry that?
To tell you, I really didn't have a lot of interaction with because once our flight landed, the helicopter was there, and we had to, for Nawaz Sharif's, there was a helipad in the residential area of Mr. Nawaz Sharif also. So very small entourage had to go from there, which comprised the Honorable Prime Minister, the National Security Advisor, Mr. Ajit Doval, the then Foreign Secretary and the current External Affairs Minister, the doctor, Mr. Vig, and myself. So I was the only person who was armed. So we sat in the helicopter and went to his house. Of course, they were very, very warm. like the hospitality which we actually get in the subcontinent. So that doesn't change from region to region.
Yeah. What a beautiful conversation it has been, isn't it? So when you remember all these episodes of your life, what comes to your mind?
A lot of it is circumstance, fate, as you can say. I would also like to quote Julius Caesar. Ki Brutus tells Cassius ki there is a time when you catch the tide at its flood, then it leads to fortune.
Yeah.
So you must also know that fate or the circumstances will present you different situations.
Yeah.
If you miss them,
are you willing to ride the tide?
are you willing to ride the tide? Or if you miss them, then you flounder.
Yeah.
If you take the tide, then you achieve a fortune.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the two things are there: whether the tide has come at the right time, and whether you have taken the tide.
You are ready.
So both things will interact.
Yeah.
Your stars and your inherent abilities.
Yeah. So let's go back to Mr. Modi. What aspects of his personality did you get to notice that might not be easily available to people? The childlike curiosity he might have. At times he might joke around. The human side of what is not visible on national television.
I have had only limited interactions with him at the fair, and I can only say what I have gleaned from the limited interaction here. And as I said, in fact, I have already said he's a great listener. One thing is, another thing which actually comes out is his lack of attachment with material things. He has a superordinate goal, which actually is in consonance with India's greatness. So basically, most of his decisions are based on that superordinate goal and is not focused on a very short-term or immediate goal. So he is one person who cannot, in my opinion, be browbeaten. Who will not get, for small short-term gains, may actually forsake a long-term objective. So these are some of the things which I have gleaned for the snippets of interactions which I have had along the way.
Beautiful. So recently you have been given a different role.
Till 2023 December, I was a special director in the Intelligence Bureau. Subsequently, since I was impaneled as a DG, I was posted as Director General, Fire Services, Civil Defense and Home Guards under the Ministry of Home Affairs.
So what kind of challenges do you face in this role?
Basically, this directorate has 4 verticals. One is supervising over the fire services across the country. So currently, we have got, in the 15th Finance Commission, we have about 5,000 crores. And this will be distributed to different states for their modernization and capacity building. I may add that the fire services in the country has a long way to travel, both in terms of capacity building, increasing the manpower, depending upon the rapid urbanization and the climate change, which is leading to more incidents and more severe incidents of fire across the country. The second vertical is the civil defense. Actually, this directorate started as a Directorate General for Civil Defense, and this started in the aftermath of 1962. When after the Indo-China War, when a Lieutenant General had come from UK to advise the government regarding setting up of this structure. So currently we have close to 6 lakh civil defense volunteers across the country. So there is a Central Civil Defense Act, and its role has been enlarged not only for before wartime and post-wartime support to the military and civilian administration in the country, but also its role during disasters.
Yeah.
And the third vertical is the home guards, which you may actually see in the streets, which actually assist the police force. So they are also a voluntary organization. So they are also volunteers, and there also the total strength in the country is close to 6 lakhs. And the fourth is emergency communication in the bordering areas in case of a hostile attack.
Yeah.
So you might have heard about the sirens and there is a blackout. So all these things, activities come under those fourth.
God.
So these are the four verticals which I am looking after currently.
Vivek sir, it was an absolute joy, privilege, and an honor to be in your company and learn from your experiences, listen to all the conversations and all the experiences that you have to share. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Gaurav.
Thank you for tuning in, and special thanks to Vivek Srivastava. What a conversation it was. They leave me pondering on what is the purpose of my existence. I mean, why do I exist? I'm sure you had your own share of learning. Be it, what does it mean to be an IPS officer, or what does it mean to be an IPS officer and a father? How to deal with complex situations? How to deal when your life is at stake? Can you still stand for the cause that you stand for? I'm sure you would love to share this conversation at least with someone you believe would get benefited and would get inspired. In case you would like to speak to me, do follow me on LinkedIn. Just drop me a text and I would love to have a conversation with you. Do take some time to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Spotify, Apple Podcast, and I look forward to meeting you and bringing to you another thought-provoking conversation next week with yet another thought leader. Take care of yourself and stay tuned.